Shabbat Shalom. We are living in a time where it's only too clear how our actions and our choices can affect the environment around us. And it's been that way even without a pandemic. The second paragraph of the Shema states that our actions will have consequences. And while the language of that paragraph of the Shema in the book of Deuteronomy is very much about reward and punishment. If you do mitzvot, if you follow God's laws, then there will be rain and it's all good time and your crops and the earth will be very full and you'll receive blessing. But if you don't, then things are gonna shut down and shut off and you're not gonna be able to have that blessing. There's gonna be curse. And we resist this, this paragraph in our modern viewpoint because it seems to say that there's some kind of God that's up there that is going to punish us or reward us for the things that we do, and it doesn't seem to quite work that way for many of us. So, but I think what we can understand this paragraph is saying that our actions have consequences and the choices we make impact the environment around us. We have consequences for the way that we consume. And we're feeling that in our current state of the world with the reality of climate change that's making our earth hotter. And one of the things that our Parsha this week asks us to look at is how our relationship to food is connected to not only our own connection with life, but how it can have a positive or negative impact on the world that we live in. Kashrut is not just a religious practice, but it's actually some guidance to how we can be in harmony with the things that are around us. What's interesting is that even before this Parsha, way back in the book of Genesis, God says, see, I give you every seed-bearing plant that is all upon the earth, every tree that has seed-bearing fruit. They shall be yours for food. And it seems that from Genesis, what God is saying is, you are going to be vegetarian. And the next verse after that, after Genesis 1:29, Genesis 1:30, puts the animals, the same thing. The animals are given seed-bearing fruits and vegetables and are also vegetarian. And then something happens, the flood. The flood of incredible destruction, really because of the wickedness of the people on the earth and how the destruction and the disrespect for life. And God wipes away everything. And after the flood, the relationship with humans and animals change. Where maybe before the flood, they were both on the same side of the knife and the fork. Now after the flood, when Noah emerges from the ark, God says, every creature that lives shall be yours to eat. As with the green grasses, I will give you these. So God now, after the flood, after this post-flood world, this devastated world, God now says, you may eat animals, you may eat meat. What was it about the flood that made things change? Some biblical scholars and commentators say that it was a concession to the human need for aggression, that somehow in the development of human beings showed themselves to have this appetite for aggression, for destruction, and that could not just be passed off with vegetarianism. People needed meat. Another interpretation was that Rabbi Isaac Abravanel said that after the devastation of the flood, humans needed animals or they would starve. If you think about it, the flood totaled all of the trees and vegetation and all of that, and there was a real need if we don't eat animals, we could starve. And so that was, again, a way. But either way, this human exploitation of animal life is really in the context of a post-flood deteriorated situation, as if to remind humanity that they are far from the ideal situation that was in the Garden of Eden. And in this new reality where human beings can eat meat, God imposes a crucial limitation. He says, you must not, however, eat the flesh with its life blood in it. So immediately, you can't have the blood. Immediately there is this affirmation that animal life, like human life, has value, and the life is in the blood. And in some way, even though consumption of meat is now permitted, wanton consumption is not. You have to be connected in some way that this animal that you're taking has life, and you're going to express it in that way by not eating the blood. You're going to somehow keep a sense of connection that these animals are not just objects for us, but they are also God's creatures. And if we are going to consume them for whatever the reason, then we need to do it with awareness. Now we come to our Parshat, Parshat Shmini, the book of Leviticus. And in this Parsha, there is presented a lengthy list of land animals, sea animals, and birds that may not be eaten. And almost all of the species that are listed in this Parsha are birds of prey. Now, the biblical scholar Baruch Levine suggests that this is because birds of prey feed on carrion and tear the flesh of other living creatures in pursuit for food. By contrast, birds that are allowed for consumption in the Parsha, hens, doves, pigeons, and chickens, all feed on grain. By avoiding eating birds of prey, we separate ourselves from them. We say that there is this animal destructive nature that may be in us too, but we are going to hold it back. And we are going to assert that we are not just like those other animals. And this is a really crucial piece to say, okay, I have an appetite for meat for whatever the reason. Maybe it's because I need it. You know, there was a time in my 20s when I was about 15 or 16, I became a vegetarian for ethical, idealist reasons. And then I was having some health issues in my 20s, and I went to a Chinese doctor, an acupuncturist, who really recommended meat for my constitution. There was something that was a health benefit that was needed for meat. So I chose to have meat, but again, with some caveats, with it being kosher, with it being at that time free range organic. There was some kind of accommodation. And in here, the accommodation is to say, you may eat birds, but they cannot be birds of prey. In addition, when we slaughter animals, and this is a later rabbinic development, many, many years after the Bible, maybe 1st century, there is a sense that in addition to removing the blood and not eating the blood, it needs to be slaughtered in a ritual way. And it's not just about a blessing, making a blessing of God when you're slaughtering the animal. It's about slaughtering the animal in a way that causes the least amount of pain. The knife has to be so sharp, it has to hit the right spot of the jugular so the animal dies instantly. So there is still this awareness that says, if I am going to be in relationship and consume meat, I'm going to do it in a way that honors that this is an alive creature. So what do we make of the texts in Genesis before and after the flood? the list of permitted animals that are here in Shmini and the rabbinic laws around kashrut, it's almost as if human beings are unable to live up to the vegetarian ideal that is set forth in creation. And so God compromises and allows humanity to eat meat. But Israel wishes to adhere to the ideal, even in a compromised fashion, and therefore only consumes animals that themselves have not killed other animals. So if this interpretation of Leviticus 11 is correct, then maybe one could argue that to limit oneself to a vegetarian diet for religious or ethical reasons is an instance of lifnim mishurat hadin, of doing more than the law actually requires in following its underlying spirit. And, you know, with all of this, we can do that in so many ways. It seems like making the choice to only eat meat that is kosher, or in our modern life now is what might be called in a kind of progressive Jewish perspective, eco-kashrut. So animals that are free range, that aren't raised in tight cages, organic, that are and that are kosher, that are slaughtered in a conscious way, is necessary to keep our sense of connection with the life around us. And as climate change threatens future generations of human life on this planet, it behooves us to ask how our relationship to the food that we consume acts in actually heating up the earth. We know that deforestation is necessary in creating more pasture for raising animals to be slaughtered. And we know that deforestation contributes to extra carbon emissions that affect our ozone layer. So it seems that while we may not choose to be vegetarian for varied reasons, our reduction of the meat we can consume can only have a positive impact on the world that we live in. And maybe we can conceive of these laws in the Torah of kashrut, again, as not applying to implore us to be religious Jews in some way, but to ask us to be in a more wise relationship with the animals and the environment around us. Shabbat Shalom.